Welcome back to the Manor, Entropians. Julian McBain here, and today we are in... Oh, yeesh. We're finishing up hour 11 of Merry Mayhem. And rolling into hour 12.
Ooh.
And here we go. So far Mayhem's been pretty good for me. I'd say I'm coming out pretty much breaking even if you put it all together. Like, I only started out with like 3 million in ammo and I've got 6, but my ped card is down, so that's kind of a wash. But no, I can't even say that because there's other loot too. So it's been... I'm still going to call it break even. I think there's other things that I'm not counting. So we'll call it break even, and I think that's fair. And really, with all the skills that you get out of it, that really is a profit in the long run. But that doesn't help your ped card any. So, I know I can't make a Daikaba disciple. Thank you, Mindark. That's one of the more interesting bugs that this game has developed. It's like, you cannot make that person a disciple. That's not a person. We know this. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about, because we're coming to the end of the year, and I had discussed this in my McBain moment that released... Today, it's Tuesday when I'm recording this, of course, because Wednesday's when it releases. And so on Tuesday mornings, I do a McBain moment. And I usually record those just before I release them, about an hour before I release them. And today it was on goal setting because, you know, end of the year means you have to think about next year's goals. And so as I was recording and I was thinking about things and I was talking about the goals that I had accomplished and the goals I had failed to accomplish and the things that I need to look at in the future. And then I got to thinking about, you know, how we as Entropians play this game almost... Whoa, 30 ped, nice. Almost as if it is a second... Or actually as if it is our second life. And understanding there's a game out there called Second Life that's primarily, if not completely, a social game. In a lot of ways, the way we interact with the world here is if we are living in this world. And so I thought about it, and I thought, you know, because of the way we interact with each other in this world, it really affects who we are and how we interact with people in the real world. And, you know, that's kind of a quote from Kirito from Sword Art Online. You know, people get trapped in the game, and they discover that the person you are in a game isn't really any different than the person you are in real life. It's just that in a game you're generally less constrained by social protocols and the law. Especially well, considering that in a lot of games there are no long-term consequences. You can actually experiment with being other people, right? You can pretend to be the bad guy. But in a game with real consequences, the real you is going to come out. If you're really a bad person, from the way society looks at what a bad person is, then that's going to come out in a game, because in a game, the law is not going to touch you for what you do in a video game. It's just not going to happen, because as far as they're concerned, this is a virtual world. There's nothing of real consequence here, but there is, and we know it. And so I think that's why we have developed the society, the virtual society, or the digital society that we have in Entropia Universe. And then it got me to thinking that, you know, what we have here is not a virtual world, but a digital one. And there's a very important distinction there. And the reason I say it that way, and I only mean that from a technical perspective, this is still the virtual world, and virtual doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't exist. But for the sake of differentiation, I'm going to use virtual versus digital for the sake of this conversation. The the digital world that we live in Entropia universe specifically, is still real. You know, it's not virtual insofar as it is not, the things we do here have real world consequences, and thus we interact with each other in the real world. And therefore, if that's the case, then the experience we gain interacting with people and setting goals for ourselves in the game is transferable into the real world. And you know, that kind of hit me like a lightning bolt. I was thinking about it while I was at my 9-to-5 job. And I was like, well, what's the real difference between setting goals in Entropia universe to, you know, get X number of skill points? Maybe you want 200 health points, which is pretty much what my aim is. Actually, I want 250 of it. 250 is kind of my goal long term. But you know, if we set goals in Entropia universe and we can figure out a plan to make them happen, and we go and execute that plan, and this works in other games too. And there's actually an entrepreneur who's using World of Warcraft to teach business leadership. Because you know, in World of Warcraft, you have to act like a team, and you have to go and you have to contend with challenges that require teamwork in such a way that you might not otherwise be able to work together as a team, and you have to rely on each other. And realistically, it works the same way in a team hunt in Entropia universe. You have to be able to work as a team, and it's even more important in EU because there's no such thing as a tank. You can have a tanky player, like I play a tanky avatar, but I can't grab aggro. You know, these mobs have no aggro table. And so in order to have a successful team hunt, you have to be able to play and work together as a group in such a way that all of the players can successfully survive the encounter. And so that's real interesting. You know, it's a great way to teach teamwork and how to deal with challenges you may not expect, and how to deal with the unexpected, because, you know, someone could still die in the game, and thankfully they don't die in real life if that happens. This isn't Sword Art Online, but at the same time, that really alters the way in which players have to contend with the mobs. And then, you know, is everyone responsible for healing themselves, or do you take someone who's dedicated to healing along with you, and how do you make sure that that person is properly reimbursed for all the ammo they go through? There's so many factors involved. And so, and that, you know, circled back to, well, if all of this is true and you can do all of these things in a digital environment such as Entropia universe, and it is a good economic model for the real world, and it's also a good social model for the real world, with people being able to contend with each other and cooperate and collaborate with each other in a world where there are no actual rules, and the only thing you really can't do is shoot each other for your stuff, which in certain places you can, like down in PvP4, which exists somewhere in this area. Or up here in this contaminated zone, where it's all lootable PvP. Or in space, where the pirates used to live. I don't know that there are any pirates left. I think Mindark's expansion of the safe zone kind of made that less lucrative than it had been. And it made pirates less annoying for the rest of us. So if that got me to thinking, well, if Entropia universe is all of these things encased within a digital environment, then why can't we use the skills of goal setting and achieving and figuring out what we want to do as an avatar, and then extract those goals out of the game, those skills we can extract out of the game and utilize them in our analog life. I know, like, mind blown there, right? This is a really important thing to think about, because, you know, life is hard, man. If nothing else, life is hard, and we all have things that we have to deal with, and we all have struggles, and we all have obstacles that we have to face, and there's suffering that we have to contend with, and there's pain, and there's worry. And so, you know, it's important that we make the best lives for ourselves that we can make. And for some of us, that means we spend our lives in Entropia universe, and this is to us the best life we can live, because we are, you know, we might be a nobody in the analog world, but we dump all of our disposable income into Entropia universe, and we become an Uber over the course of 10 years. And I'm sure that's probably not the case generally speaking, but considering that's how there are WoW players and there are Final Fantasy players who do just that. And they use the game to escape their suffering instead of taking responsibility for themselves. These games should never be used as a permanent form of escapism. They can use a temporary form of escapism for short periods of time. And I know I say that as someone who plays a lot of video games. Thankfully, I have found an alternative use for video games that really works for me, and that's being a YouTuber. And no, I don't make any money off of being a gamer, and there's nothing wrong with that. I enjoy providing the value to you, and you seem to be liking it. And so I appreciate your being here, and so I continue to do these things. But at the same time, if we can take the skills that we build by playing video games and extract them out in this, you know, maybe it is a form of abstraction. We abstract what we are doing in the game and the skills we are using in the game in order to achieve whatever definable goal we have within that game, whether it's completing a mission or completing a quest or doing a 15-hour endurance hunt for Mayhem. It doesn't matter what the goal is. It takes a certain amount of grit to get through all of the trash you've got to go through, all of the crap that they throw at you in order to achieve the goal. And that, you know, World of Warcraft used to be famous for that, with all the grinding you had to do just to find, I think it was meat from Striders if you were Horde. You could be out there for 10 hours trying to farm the stupid thing, and then you've got all the pets that are, you know, 1.1% drop, and you're out there killing dragon whelps for hours on end. Been there, done that. And I did it twice because I got my girlfriend one too. Actually, I got hers first. Then I decided I wanted one and went back to friggin' farming. But it's the same for Entropia Universe, and perhaps it's even more intense in Entropia Universe, because Entropia Universe's goal base is so vague. And so it's kind of like Minecraft. We got to come up with our own reasons for playing. And think about that for a second. That's a really tough skill to develop. It is. It's an extremely tough skill to develop, you know, to be given a wide open platform where there is no definable goal, and so you have to come up with a reason to play. And for them to have created a platform that is so engaging that we continue to come back to it time and time again and come up with our own reasons for playing, that's mind-boggling. That's such an incredible feat. Because, I mean, what the hell do we know about ourselves? I think we can know, maybe we might have discovered 10% of how the brain works and how personality works and how the mind works. And I think that there's just petabytes of information about ourselves that we just don't know. And so what we need to do is we need to say, okay, you know what? It's true. I'm able to focus on this for hours on end. I can come up with a goal. The goal can be vague, or this is an idea, or I've decided, you know, I'm going to go achieve this thing, even if it's only I'm going to go blow 50 pet on a hunt and figure out, you know, if I come out with a profit or not. And then say, okay, I've accomplished X. What can I do with X to come up with a better Y? If I take those skills out and extract the skills I've developed in myself to be able to do X in this video game, and how can I apply them to my real life. And the funny thing is that the most important skills I've developed by playing Entropia Universe have almost nothing to do with Entropia Universe. The first thing is I've learned how to deal with repetitive, doing repetitive tasks a lot better, because that's the nature of grind, right? You got to do repetitive tasks over and over, and you got to be patient, because if you're not patient, you'll never make it. And I mean, that's pretty much 90% of 9 to 5 jobs is, you know, repetitive action. And then it's also learning how to live on commission, because I work a job where I earn commission. And so that's basically what Entropia Universe is. You kill X number of mobs, and the commission is your loot. And, you know, you have to pay taxes out of that. And so your hope is that the amount of loot that you achieve is going to be greater than the amount of money it takes for you to earn that loot. And I mean, that's kind of the core of entrepreneurship if you really want to think about it. And so you learn to think like an entrepreneur in a lot of ways. And I mean, there's a lot more to it than that. It's very, very simplified, but it puts you in the mindset. And so if you want to develop those skills, you know, you go onto YouTube, like you know you're on right now watching my video, and then you think, you know, that's not a bad idea. Maybe I should watch a couple videos on entrepreneurship, and then you go there and you learn a little bit about it and you develop that skill further. Excuse me, I was fighting that hiccup. And so you start watching, I don't know, Tony Robbins or Dan Lok or whoever, and you're like, okay, yeah, I understand what they're doing, and I like how I can now turn this skill that I got the foundations of in a video game into a skill that can make me money. And so I think that's the real value of things like Entropia Universe. If we can, and I mean, we're gamers. We're some of the most creative people out there. We have to be. You know? And we work in teams rather well. We work in teams with people we have never met. Think about that. That's what a pickup group is. You know, you go out and you go, you know, let's say you're people in your society. They could be, I know, I did one the other day. I think one of them was in Ireland and the other one was who knows where. And we were all, we ran out and we went and hunted for like, well, unfortunately I was only there for 10 minutes because I got called away. It was like, we need you right now. And it's like, well, crap, guys, I'm sorry. And if either of you were watching this, I'm really sorry I had to go that day. It was not by design, trust me. But it was, you know, you do these pickup groups, and so now you have to work. You don't only have to work with people, you're working with people you do not know who may in fact come from an entirely separate culture from you. And you have to be able to work together to accomplish the goal, even if the goal is really basic, like fighting mobs in a video game, in such a way where nobody dies and everyone gets a share of the loot. And that's a powerful, powerful skill to have. If you can cultivate a skill like that, shit, you're on your way to a negotiating career. And negotiators, you know, business negotiation, especially working with international teams, that's money. You'll get rich doing that in no time. It's like the ultimate resume builder. So okay, we've got this platform, and we've got figured out that the platform has given us an opportunity to learn skills that we may not otherwise have the opportunity to learn. And so, well, what do we do with that information? Well, go out there and experiment with it. You know? Humans are social animals. We are social animals, and we are, by design, we are designed to be able to be persistent and patient over long periods of time, because that's how we hunted. You know, we aren't fast like the cheetah or able to run great distances like the gazelle, but we can walk forever, man. I mean, we can just days. and we would just chase our prey over miles and miles and miles until they were so weary that they just dropped dead from exhaustion, because, you know, they'd go to take a nap and they'd wake up and there we'd be, and they'd be like, oh shit, and they'd run away again, and then we just walk after them. And so, you know, chase after your goals with that type of persistence. And grinding things in Entropia Universe does wonders for building patience. I am dead serious. That is probably the most important skill that a game like Entropia Universe can teach us, is that absolute patience and persistence while having to do redundant, repetitive tasks. And then experiment with that and say, you know what, I want to go hunt. And so you go to Camp Icarus and say, hey, or you go into your own society. You know, these are people who have all freely associated with each other, even though you really don't know each other. And, you know, it's societies in EU tend to be a lot looser than, say, guilds in WoW. And even then, that's not the case. But the guild that I was a member of, we all know each other, like, in person. We have been in the same house. You know, we've played Cards Against Humanity with each other. I mean, that's the relationship there. You know, you can play Cards Against Humanity with someone. You can tell them anything. You know, your personality comes out playing that game, let me tell you. And so okay, you've got these people who are freely associated. So you go to your society and say, I'm looking for 4 or 5 people to go hunting with me, and I want to hunt things that are at a higher level than any of us could necessarily do on our own. Maybe you're hunting the bots at Fort Lahar or something. And so you all go out there and or let's pick something a little less randomized. Well, depending on your level, you could go to Hades, but Hadesheim, but I don't think that's necessarily a good idea for most people, including myself. So, oh, I know. Let's say you go to Dustkeep Valley, and you're going to challenge the War Chief. And so, okay, the 4 or 5 of you go out to Dustkeep Valley, and you do the War Chief's challenge, and you've got all of the waves of mobs that come after you, and you've got to keep each other alive. Because as soon as one of you drops, that's a critical amount of damage that you're not doing, and more mobs constantly show up, so you've got to work together. Honestly, on a thing like that, having voice chat is really useful. And so you all work together, and, you know, maybe one of you keeps the others alive, and the rest of you focus on burning down the mobs, and you're just constantly pumping out the damage, and you work together to bring down the mobs, and finally the boss arrives. And the boss is like, you know, 15 times the level of the regular mobs. It's not that bad, it's like 6, but, you know, can do an immense amount more damage than any of the individual previous mobs. And so you've got to really focus on taking him down and know when to stop hitting it so that the aggro drops off of you and goes onto another player, so that you can be healed by the healer sufficiently as you don't die. And everyone else has to be able to figure that out too, and that's not easy. So you've given yourself a real challenge, and now you're working with people you've never worked with before. You come from various cultures, because in this game I've probably met people from a dozen countries in this game that I'm aware of. Okay? I've met people from Russia. I've met people from Sweden, obviously. I've met people from Venezuela. And Venezuela is not in good shape right now. I've met Brazil, Ukraine, England, Ireland. I think I met a couple from China. Scotland. So, I mean, there's just... You're talking immensely diverse cultures. But none of that matters because we're all Entropians. You know, Entropia is its own culture. And so we work together to accomplish these goals. And that's a skill. That's a marketable skill. And so, okay, you've gone out there and you've put yourself out there and you've gathered the team and you've successfully defeated the War Chief. And so now what skills have you practiced or you've started to develop there? You've developed building teams from scratch. You have managed to bring that team to a stated goal and accomplish that goal, and you've done so where even language is a possible barrier. So what do you do with that knowledge and information? Well, doing it once doesn't mean you're going to be successful over long periods of time, so you've got to be able to repeat it. So you come in the next day and you do the same thing. And it's useful to write down, it's like, hey, where are y'all from? And you don't have to get specific about it. It can't be like 123 ABC Street in, Reykjavik, Iceland. But you can get, I'm from Iceland, I'm from Sweden, I'm from Norway, I'm from the United States. And in the United States, you've got 50 different major cultures there. And even parts of individual states are their own culture compared to other parts of that state. And that's something that a lot of people that aren't from the U.S. really don't get about the U.S. is we're not a unified nation. We're a federation of 50 different semi-sovereign states. And so within those states, you've got 50 macro cultures. And then regionally within those states, you've got micro cultures. And so even if you can build teams across culturally different, the different cultures that the states in the United States have, that's a useful skill to have. Because a person from Texas is not going to think like a person from California, is not going to think like a person from North Dakota. I've only never been to California out of all those, by the way. I used to live in North Dakota. I've lived in Montana, and boy, isn't that a change of pace from living in Vermont, because I grew up in Vermont and I moved out west, and I actually learned how to contend with the world better living in a place like North Dakota where the very weather will kill you. Like in Vermont, yeah, the weather can kill you if you're not careful and if you're being stupid. In North Dakota, the weather can kill you if you step outside at the wrong time. Okay, it's not quite that bad, but someone walking from their car at the end of their quarter-mile driveway didn't make it to their house because they weren't properly dressed. That is a thing that's happened in living memory. So if you ever want to know what you can contend with, go live in North Dakota for a couple of years. That's off topic, I'm sorry. But anyway, you've built these teams over time, and you write down the information. You're just like, okay, I've built these teams, and I've done it multiple times with people from multiple cultures and multiple countries across the world. And we set a goal and we accomplished the goal. Or if we failed at the goal, here's what went wrong. And the next time, here is what we did to prevent that from happening again. And that's a real skill. That's an extremely marketable skill too. If you can do that, geez. If an employer refuses to pick you up when you have a skill like that, then they're stupid. That's a real skill to have. And having documentable proof that it happened is the important part. And being able to prove it by doing it in real life. Because once you can do it in this digital world, now you got to be able to do it out there in the analog world. And that's much tougher because you actually have to face the people you need to work with and look them in the eye. And that's so much harder than looking at their avatar. But you have to be able to do it. And so, develop that skill. Develop all the skills that we develop in a video game. A lot of them are very transferable into real life. We just don't realize it. It's crazy just what skills you can develop inside a video game. One of the best skills that I sharpened while in a video game was my leadership skills, because when I did play World of Warcraft, I was the guild leader, which meant there was some organization that had to happen. But we were a small guild. There were only, I think the most we ever had was 8 people. Did we make 9? Yeah, we made 9. We managed to do a raid and almost have a full party. which actually we did remarkably well, all things considered, at that. But I mean, that's not a large guild, but we were successfully handling larger and larger challenges and dealing with interpersonal relationships. Sometimes we were more successful than others at managing that, but that's the nature of the beast. But I was able to sharpen that leadership skill, which had been underutilized for a long time, by being the person who led from the front as the tank, because I had to select how we, as best as you can in any game, how we were to contend with the enemies in front of us, because I was the one who had to hold the aggro. And, you know, to a similar extent, our healer, because I mean, you got 5 people in a team in World of Warcraft, and so it's a tank, 3 damage dealers, and a healer, and the healer had to be able to step in and say, you know, it was kind of like a veto. It's like, you know what, you might think you can tank that many, but I can't heal through that much damage. And so there was that whole negotiation about, okay, I know I can take this much damage and you can heal through this much damage, so is this a challenge that we can accomplish? And or if you can't necessarily heal through it all, can the people doing damage deal damage fast enough to make it so that's not an issue? And you have to deal with things that you're not expecting, skills that pop up, and you know, at different skill or difficulty levels, new skills pop up, new things pop up, and you have to be able to contend with those things, and you need to be able to adapt plans for it and figure out how to handle these things. I mean, it's very low resolution when you do it in something like World of Warcraft, but it gives you the baseline for the skill. And it's just a good skill to have. You know, the amount of progress you can make in your 9-to-5 employment just by developing something as simple as basic leadership skills, you'll increase your value by 3-fold easily. And that doesn't mean that you can just walk in and declare yourself the boss. You got to learn how to follow before you can learn how to lead. I mean, being able to follow is probably the most important leadership skill you can have. And knowing when to delegate your leadership, delegate your leadership is just as important. You know, you can watch the Marvel movies and see how just watch Tony Stark from the Marvel universe, and you'll get like one of the best examples of how to be a leader, especially in business. And I haven't even watched most of the Marvel movies. I've just watched all of the analyses of it, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should watch this shit. My problem is I don't watch a whole lot of movies. Never have. I'm not a movie person. I mean, there are some movies I really like, and I can sit down and actually watch them. But it's not consistent. I tend to prefer interactive digital content. Or I prefer interactive entertainment to non-interactive forms of entertainment. That's just my personality. You know, instead of watching people do the thing, I want to be doing the thing myself. And so but still, it would be worth, you know, looking at or finding the material like on YouTube to watch while you're playing Entropia Universe, because I'm willing to bet probably half of the people who watch this video are probably playing a game while they're doing it, and it's probably going to be Entropia Universe because you're watching Entropia Universe. I mean, you know, that's as basic as 2 + 2 makes 4. But yeah, I mean, if you can develop that skill, you can develop it playing Entropia Universe, or you can develop it playing WoW, or you can do it playing Final Fantasy. You can develop that leadership skill playing Dungeons and Dragons. Actually, you can develop a lot of skills playing Dungeons and Dragons, which it's really probably one of the most underappreciated games ever created. But you take what you develop as a gamer and you turn around and you stop. And I know, like, the thing is in a lot of cases, if you play EU, I'm probably preaching to the choir, because I have met the most professionals who also are gamers in this game. But at the same time, it has to be said, if you're a gamer who is living a mundane life and you don't work to improve your real life because you've decided to dedicate the whole life to the digital life, stop. The fact that you are doing this and playing Entropia Universe and developing these skills, you are wasting yourself by not using that skill you've developed outside of there to make yourself more money. Or to give yourself the life you really want. And, you know, you might not be successful 100% of the time. You might only be successful 30% of the time. But you know what? Being successful 30% of the time sure as hell beats 0. Think about that for a second. I work in a commission-based environment. I work in sales. My closing rate, when I get a customer on the phone, is between 33 and 40%. And that's a good closing rate. So if you are only accomplishing a goal between 33 and 40% of the time, you're doing good. Don't expect to make it 100. There is so much to you, you don't even understand the basics of your own personality. You know, even the professional psychologists who have, 30 years of experience in the field, and they'll be the first ones to admit we might know 10% about what we know about ourselves. So what the hell do us lay people know? But it doesn't matter. If you can put your life into a little bit better shape than it was yesterday, if you're accomplishing 30% of what you want to accomplish as opposed to 0, then aren't you doing better? So figure out what real life skills you've actually developed by being a gamer. And for God's sake, go put them to use. Seriously. In the job you have now, do it today. Or if you're watching at this after you've been done at work, go do it tomorrow. I think that gamers are probably the biggest untapped resource of human intelligence in existence today. And it's because the most of us, by our very nature, quite frankly, and I'm calling myself out on this too, we're fucking lazy. We are. And I am too. I fight that aspect of myself every single day. Because we know when we get home from work, we can jump into the game. It doesn't matter if it's a video game or a tabletop game. We can jump into the game. That's our dopamine urge or a surge. But think about it for a minute. Wouldn't you feel better about yourself jumping into the game if you were making more money? Or if you had a cleaner room? Or if you had eaten better throughout the day? Maybe instead of ramen, you actually had 3 meals. And yes, I say that as someone who lived on pretty much nothing but ramen for a full year. Ramen and toast. I lost weight that year, and I didn't have a whole lot to lose at the time. We, as a demographic, can do better for ourselves. And we rob ourselves of our own potential because we aren't willing to take a hard look at ourselves in the mirror and say, you know what, I have all these skills, and now I need to buckle down and put them to work not only in the game, but in my real life. And it doesn't matter how hard it is. Because it's tough. It is. I say that from experience. I've been there. You get home from work and you're living in government subsidized housing and you're on food stamps, and the only pleasure you get out of the day is the 20 minutes you get at your PlayStation that you received for Christmas back before you were an adult. Been there, done that. And you might have to pause the game for 15 minutes in order to go change a diaper or feed your child. Been there, done that too. But it doesn't matter. Don't let the negatives in your life subsume the positives you can create from it. Using the skills you have developed by being... And this is the funny thing. When I was a kid, being a geek, being a gamer made you the outcast. And now it's mainstream. It makes you cool. Gamers are basically the jocks of the nerds. That like blows my freaking mind. I spent my entire school career being the geek and the nerd, and I was put in that caste. And I mean, you don't get more caste society than a high school. And the castes evolve over time. There was greasers and jocks, and there was the smokers and the non-smokers, and then you had the geeks and the jocks, right? Jocks tend to be a recurring theme in high school. And then I went to college, and I went to an engineering college that happened to have it was a flight school and an engineering college that pretty much marry each other in a kind of a, frankly, an unholy union. And so me as a geek, I decided I wanted to fly, and so I went to this college, and I was the geek who had suddenly become a jock, because in the school the pilots were the jocks, and that was hard to contend with because I was too geeky to be a jock and I was too jock to be a geek because I was a flight student. And then that ended up developing over time, and now I'm a fighter, and now I really am a jock of sorts, which still blows my mind. But I took the skills and I figured out how to utilize them. And I'm still figuring that out. That's a lifelong development. So what did I do with those skills? I used my ability to, back when I was younger, I preferred real-time strategy and turn-based strategy and things where you had to think, right? And so I used those skills to think strategically about how to how to plan out and figure out how to create more profit in what I was doing. Because at the time I was a grocer, and I'm a third-generation grocer, technically speaking. My grandfather was a grocer, my father is a grocer. He still runs small box grocery stores. I think he works for 7-Eleven now as a manager, but he's run convenience stores most of my life. We used to own a family neighborhood market that went under because the family neighborhood market got subsumed by the gas station convenience store sometime in the late 90s, early 2000s. Gas stations used to have service stations with them. Those were your garages, and so, they got almost wholly subsumed by the convenience store gas station combination, so neighborhood markets just kind of disappeared. And so, I learned the trade of being a grocer, and that's good, honest work, but let me tell you, you're working 70 hours a week. And you have to contend with the fact that it's hard to find good employees for that, because as soon as you develop a good employee, other companies will recognize that potential and take them from you by offering them more than you can provide. That's a reality in grocery. Well, so I had to utilize the strategic thinking that I developed from being a gamer into making my stores more profitable. And, I figured out, okay, well, if this has such and such an income when you farm it, because that's what gaming is. It's a lot of farming. Well, it's like, well, if this is a popular thing to purchase, I'm going to go find more of this thing. And so I would find the vendors that provided it. I couldn't go out and hunt mobs for it because, people kind of frown if you go out and start, swinging swords around trying to collect items. But in real life, but if you can take the thought process and say, well, if I buy more of this item, it will create more profit, which is going to make me more successful. And so that I used the strategic thinking from that, but that didn't really develop the leadership. I developed that, well, I did have the ROTC thing and all of that going for me, but largely speaking, when it came to that got developed after I became a WoW guild leader for the time period that I was. And so, that guild is still together. The 4 of us that make up the core of that guild is still together. It's just the dynamic of it's changed significantly over time, and that's okay. Because we all develop. But, these were skills extracted from playing games. Because that's all life really is. It's a series of games that we play with each other. By a set of rules that we have agreed upon as a society. And once we figure that out, then life becomes far more manageable. And so what do you do with that information? You got to figure out, okay, what skills have I developed playing all these games that I can extract the essence of, and then apply the essence of these skills in the real world. And that right there is going to be a challenge all its own, because, you got to figure out, okay, well, sitting around and hunting mobs for hours on end is not a skill that most employers need, but the ability to do repetitive tasks is. Now, that doesn't make you a huge amount of money, not from the core of it, but what else can you do with that? Well, maybe you've learned patience from this to deal with things that other people don't have the patience to handle, and so you now you have a skill that is marketable. Patience is extremely marketable, and you can go and say, you know what, I have the patience to sit here and repetitively do something for hours on end. And so you can go out to a manufacturer and you can make widgets for 8 hours a day for a couple of years, and while you're making those widgets, you're earning money that you can then put into learning new things. And because you are able to do things for long hours, you don't mind going and learning new things after work. Because although you're tired, you can still function. And so maybe you're learning that skill while you're playing your game by watching YouTube videos like you are now, but they're YouTube videos based on that particular skill. Or maybe you purchase that learning from let's say any sort of vendor. That's bad language. I'm getting tired. It's like 11 o'clock here. PM 2300. From someone who actually teaches the skill. So let's say you want to learn marketing, and so you go to one of the various business guru websites and you purchase their training. Maybe it's 99% off, so you get it for like $31, or maybe you spend the $3,000 on it, and so you go there and you learn the skill, and you have to practice the skill, and so you do something strange like, I don't know, make a YouTube channel. And so you practice making videos. Well, now you're developing the skill to be able to talk to people through a video and make them want to watch the content. And you would be surprised how much money you can charge a person to make videos that people want to watch so that they go and buy their shit. Like, I had no clue. And yes, I'm kind of using some self-effacing humor there because I did that thing. And the purchase of the marketing content, because I've said this before and I'll say it again, I love watching marketing content. I was a marketing major in college after I left the flight program. I love like different types of advertising. I love the whole webinar format thing where you you give value and teach most of a skill, and you're like, well, purchase this $1,000 program and see you'll learn the secret that you need to unlock all of this other potential I just showed you. Right? Hispidus. Shit. Well, let's take you down first. But at the same time, the point is not lost. You can take all that and you can extract what you need. And you can develop yourself. And then you can figure out, okay, this is the basics I learned by being a video gamer. Now let's develop myself further and actually learn the skills. If you can do that, you'll be unstoppable. You know? I mean, it took me... From when I graduated college in 2008. And I had pretty much nothing. My son had been born. I was the only earner in a family of 3. My girlfriend at the time, who would later become my wife, who we would later find out we didn't end up legally married, not because we didn't do all the things we were supposed to, because the minister didn't turn in the marriage certificate, which is a thing in Vermont. So when we went to file for divorce, that got real interesting. But the important part is, and I don't know why I decided to go into it, probably because I am exhausted and I've been drinking and I've been doing this for an hour. You know, I went from not having enough to figuring out how to get myself out of that situation so that we were no longer on welfare and we were able to pay our way. And why I'm telling you all that is because you can too. Because if even I can manage to do something like that, anyone can. So I guess that's the point of this hour-long talk. You know, if someone like me can do it, obviously anyone else can. Because no, I'm not exactly Silver Spoon. So I want to leave it at that. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe down below. We're on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time. So make sure you subscribe. Guys, if you're still here, thank you so much for sticking around. I really hope this helps. I think that we have a lot more potential than we give ourselves credit for. And I think we need to start really looking at ourselves in the mirror and saying, yes, that's the case. All right. It's 2300. I'm headed to bed. Have a good night, everyone.